Okay, here we go, everyone. Welcome to the 22nd episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy. And for my very special guest today, I have here Varsha from Reading by the Rainy Mountain. Hello, Varsha. How are you today?
Hey, Philip. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me here.
It is my pleasure. And I am delighted to be talking with you for several reasons. And of course, there are, I'm sure, plenty of series that we have in common that we're going to be talking about. I first noticed your channel as you were talking about Malazan. So you are a Malazan reader, but I'm sure there's a lot more there as well. And we'll be talking about that. But I am very curious, actually. I have a question for you, if you don't mind. Where did you get the name for your channel? Which, by the way, will be in the description below, so everyone can link to it. The link will be there, so everyone can go to your channel and subscribe and all that. But where did you get this wonderful name, Reading by the Rainy Mountain?
So my name is Varsha, which in a lot of Indian languages means rain. And and it was raining the night I was born, and my mom named me for it. I always thought it was funny that she named me after the thing that got it difficult to get to the hospital.
Oh no.
But anyway, I love my name, and also I live in Seattle, which is very rainy, and we live really close to a mountain. So I put all of those together into the name of my channel.
I love it. I know that mountain pretty well. I've been on that mountain. It's, of course, Mount Rainier.
And, yes, that's true. But I actually live really close to Mount Si. So.
Oh, okay. I had assumed it was Rainier we were talking about. But yes, so yes, if you're in Washington State, you have lots of really beautiful mountains out there. I know because I did live there myself for a time. Beautiful state, actually. And Seattle is a very cool city as well, I think, a place that I spent some time. Though I did not live in Seattle. I lived close, more south on the I-5 corridor, but still lovely place. So that's just beautiful. And I love that your name means rain. That's a beautiful name. I think that's, your mother named you well, because, you know, if we didn't have rain, there would be no life, right? So
I do really like my name, and I love the rain as well. So I really like where I live. I don't know if I like it because of my name, or I feel like my name obligates me to love the rain.
Yeah, well, I think the reputation for Washington State it is rainy during the winter months and so forth, but the summer is actually very dry. That's the secret that I think people in Washington don't want everyone to know, because everyone would go live there because it's so nice. So they just say, oh yeah, it's very rainy here all the time, right? Yeah.
It's beautiful in the summer, and it's pretty dry. Yes, we get a good 4 to 6 months, I think, of no rain, and I think this year it's really dragging out for longer than that. Like 25 degrees Celsius today, which is, I think, pretty hot for this time of year.
For that part of the country, for sure. But lovely. So now that we've covered the name of your channel, let's talk books. So I think we'll just go right ahead with our standard question, which is, I'm very curious to know about your reading journey. What are some of the important books that have formed you, that are part of who you are? What are some of the stories that you've encountered over the years, from as early as you like, but going on the premise that you are what you read? What are some of the most important stories that you have dealt with in your life, Varsha?
So I think the first book that I ever remember reading was The Enchanted Wood by Enid Blyton. We were going by train from, I think, Chennai to back home, and my mom was, I think I was in a mood. My mom was worried I'd throw tantrums, so she got me a book from a cart, and it was this one. And I think that was the first novel that I read. Before that, I was reading a lot of magazines and like short stories that we used to get with the newspaper. I read those a lot, but The Enchanted Wood was the first one. And and it worked because I was quiet the whole train ride and for a long time afterwards while I finished the book. yeah, so that was definitely a big one because I think that might have also been the first Enid Blyton that I read.
Nice.
Because I went on to read a lot of Famous Five and Secret Seven. These were all books that my mom loved when she was growing up, and she shared them with me. She'd read them with me too. So that was a lot of fun. Yeah, I think pretty much every Enid Blyton series I've read at least a few books from, but I don't think I've ever read all of them. Like I haven't read all of Mallory Towers or all of Famous Five or even all of the Secret Seven. I don't think, even the shorter series, I've never finished them, but I maybe want to at some point in the future. I'm not sure.
Wow. So if I could just interrupt you for a moment, I'm so sorry, but
oh no, go ahead.
That sounds like a very magical memory to me, being on the train and reading and remembering that. And I can relate a little bit because I have been on a train going into and out of Chennai myself. I traveled all over South India. So I think I was on my way to Pondicherry at the time. But I went all over the place in the south to places like Uti, of course. They're, the touristy places, and so yeah, it was really fantastic. I went to Kerala. I loved Kochi, was fantastic, and Hyderabad, and all over the place. So that's just very special. When you said train from Chennai, I had a lot of memories triggering in my brain too. So
I used to travel to Chennai. Like there was, we always traveled to visit relatives a few times a year, and it was Chennai, Pondicherry, Tanjavur sometimes, and sometimes it was multiple trains. We took multiple trips during the summer. It was always a lot of fun. Yeah,
special memories there. Neat. So anyway, we were on your reading journey.
Yes, on the reading train. And then my dad got me a bunch of these abridged classics. There were these little square-shaped books that had a picture on one side and text on the other. And they were pretty short. I mean, I think they were about 250, 300 pages, but only half of them had text. And Little Women and David Copperfield were special favorites in that.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And I love the pictures, and I think I read both of those like several times. And there were a bunch of other Charles Dickens there, Great Expectations and Oliver Twist. I also had an abridged classic for A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. That was the first time I met Arthur and Merlin. I had no idea who they were. It was just some guy time traveling into their court. But
wow.
I still want to read the unabridged versions of all these books. I have read David Copperfield and Little Women unabridged many times over, but I've got to get to all the others. I'm really looking forward to it. I think one big thing that surprised me when I read David Copperfield unabridged was just how funny Charles Dickens was. Like it was just a big summary of the story in the abridged versions, but there were so many jokes in there that I was like, I've been missing out all this time. But but I did also rediscover a different way to love the book. So that was nice. So that was from my dad. And then my uncle got me a boxed set of P.G. Wodehouse.
Oh, nice.
It was 10 books. And most of them were Jeeves and Wooster, but there
was Jeeves and Wooster.
Yeah, I love those two. And I think it took me a while to figure out that Bertie Wooster is just dumb and Jeeves is always swooping in to save him.
And you're of course aware probably that they are a Malazan influence too, right?
Oh, really? I'm not.
Yeah, I can't remember. So how far into Malazan are you? Have you read all the Malazan Book of the Fallen yet?
I have like 100 pages left in Toll the Hounds. That's
okay. So just taking you back to Midnight Tides.
Oh, Tail and Bug. I thought they reminded me so much of that, except, I was thinking Bertie Wooster would never be, spoilers, I guess, but smart enough to be Theo. So I think this is really smart. So,
that's not really a spoiler, but no, they are an acknowledged inspiration, I believe, for that dynamic duo in Malazan, which is famous for its dynamic duos. So
yes. Oh, that pair always reminds me of Jeeves and Wooster, but I talk myself out of it because Theo is not dumb.
No, yeah, and Worcester is really pretty thick-headed, so yeah. Yeah.
Yes. What was I saying? Oh yeah, Wooster. And then I think my favorite in that collection, though, I think was Money for Nothing or Piccadilly Gym. Yeah, no, that one was a favorite, but I don't remember the story. So I guess I'll have fun rereading it now at some point. I also read a lot of Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys because that's what we got from the school libraries.
Yeah.
And my aunt let me borrow, her son gifted her all of the Perry Mason books, and she let me borrow them. And I read a bunch of those, and that was a lot of fun. He's a lawyer and gets out of some pretty sticky situations, gets his clients out of sticky situations. So that was fun to read. Let's see. So that was all my school time. And then I think, oh yeah, Harry Potter. I think around 8th grade, I discovered Harry Potter. And I think 3 or 4 of the books were out at the time. And then afterwards, I read the books as they came out.
Oh, so you were, okay, nice. Yeah.
When I was in my, I think, second year of college when the last book came out. And my parents knew how much I loved the book, and so they pre-ordered it at a nearby bookstore.
Wow.
And then I had my operating systems class at 8 a.m. or something. And when I came out of the class, they were there having collected the book on the day of release. So
wow.
That was really special to me because, I mean, every summer we'd go and I'd get a budget, and there's this big street where vendors put like mats out and sell secondhand books. And we'd go the first week of summer. My mom would take me and my dad, of course, and we'd go, they'd give me a budget, like you can spend 500 rupees on books this time. And then I'd go pick and choose, and I have to optimize what I want. And I'd come back with like big stack because they were used books. They were pretty cheap. So I'd come back with a stack of like 20 books to work my way through in the summer. So yeah, I do that every year. So I mean, they always encouraged my love of books, but this was like, and I lived about an hour's drive away from home. So they woke up early enough to go pick up the books and then come drop it off to me between classes, just in time for me to pick it up. And it was a weekday at that. So yeah.
Wow. That's a very special memory, I'm sure.
Yeah, it really was. And I mean, I don't know if I appreciated it that much at the time, but now when I think back to it, it means a lot to me that they did that. In college, my college had a really good library. That's where I discovered Neil Gaiman, American Gods. I really loved that book.
I do too. It's a favorite of mine, and it teaches really well. It's a book I've read I don't know how many times because I taught it in my fantasy novels class as well. It always generates great conversations.
Yeah. I have been meaning to read because I read a lot of these when I was in college without, I guess, just any story that sounded interesting. So, and also my main reading strategy usually is to find out what happens more than anything else. And I always have like quotes that I like that I used to mark out, and I tried to keep a notebook with it at some point, and it got out of hand, and so I had to stop. But that's Kindle is really helpful with that. You can always highlight and not break your reading too much. But anyway, so I used to read to find out what happens and any important lines that I thought were nice, but not for like overall themes and structures, which I think your channel and a few others have talked about a lot, and I'm trying to change how I read, or rather, I guess it's inherently changing how I read because I'm thinking about all these things now.
Yeah, I think it's fine to talk about any number of things, and themes are one thing you can talk about as someone who loves books and stories. I find it very rewarding to talk about themes, and it helps me to appreciate books more. But it's perfectly fine also to talk about, to pick out, like you said, to find good quotes that really speak to you.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful thing to do, and to share that with people, and also just to say, I loved this book, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
without too much thinking about what exactly I loved about it. That too. Yeah, I
yeah,
used to that, but I mean, it's what I think. I feel like it would enhance my reading experience if I also noticed all these other things that you talked about.
yes.
So, I don't know if I'm actively trying to do it, but when I do notice more things, I'm like, oh yeah, it's I have more ways to like the story now. So that's pretty cool.
It is cool. It really is, and it deepens your experience, I think, of with the
Yeah,
story
yeah,
as well,
yeah.
and helps you to remember it even more, I think, when you take the time to
Mm,
analyze the things like the themes and the characters and the setting and the tone and the style
yeah,
and symbols and the title. Sometimes when you think, oh wow, I didn't realize the title is pointing to this important theme all along,
right,
or,
right.
stuff like that,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, it's fun.
yeah, exactly. Even things like chapter names, when we go back and look at them, I think, yeah, they can mean a lot. And I love stories which maybe start with something that happened and then they tell us how we got this way. I think some might consider those spoilers for the story, but I love it when we start with where we start. This is how we started. No, this is where we end up, and we work backwards from there. I always like those. So yeah, I think so. Those four stories also force you to try to read more into
Yeah.
what's happening to see where you end up, right?
Yeah, so
So
then when the narrative style is different or creative in some way,
yeah,
and you're reading Toll the Hounds right now, and I think it would be very helpful to think about the narration in Toll the Hounds, which would be an important part of what that book says. I think the message of that book is very much tied to what Stephen Erickson does in the narration. So
Mhm.
thinking about that is, I think, a very important step in
Yeah,
engaging with that book. So yeah, you're absolutely right. So to think about something like narration and what an author can achieve by having a certain narrator and certain
right.
narrative perspective
Yeah,
is definitely enriching for an understanding of the story. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I definitely agree. I think N.K. Jemisin has some really creative narrative techniques that she's, or like narrative styles. I know
Yes, in the
everybody.
Broken Earth trilogies,
Yeah.
just really cool what she
Yeah.
does there. For to me, I love it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I love that, and I love how it all ties together in the end. But in the, have you read the Inheritance Trilogy by
Not
her?
yet. No, I need to read that. The only thing by her I've read, and I love it, so I need to read more of her stuff,
Mhm,
is the Broken Earth trilogy.
mhm.
And it's a real favorite of mine. And because I started out reading it like a lot of people, being like, what is this second person thing?
Yeah,
What is she doing here? And then
yeah,
by the end, I found myself in complete awe and admiration of what she had pulled off. And that's
yeah,
part of it. So I can't say more without spoilers, but I thought, wow, I
yeah,
mean, that's gutsy, number one, and brilliantly executed, number two. So I thought
yeah.
she did something really special with that. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. I love that series. I think I read the whole trilogy in a week and a half or something like that. I just could
Wow.
not put it down.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then I picked up the Inheritance Trilogy because I wanted to read more by her. And even that, I think each book has a different narrator and different narrative technique that she uses to sort of tie it together. I haven't, yeah, I think this, she doesn't do this in The City We Became, but in the three books, the narrator always has some meaning, like they mean something to the story. So I really love that. That's very, I guess it's pretty experimental. I'm not sure. I don't think I've read enough to say one way or the other, but it's beautiful. I love it. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot how we got here.
Oh, we're wandering all over, but I think we still have some books to talk about from your journey. So you basically you were in college, I think, and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I discovered a lot of fun books then. I think I read Aragon at the time. I think
Oh
on,
yes,
yeah,
yeah. Another
yeah.
inheritance series in the
Yes,
inheritance cycle, right? Yeah,
yes, the
yeah,
inheritance cycle.
yeah.
I think only Aragon and Eldest were out at the time, and I loved both of them. And I think the third one is called Brissinger.
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
I've read them all myself once. Yeah. Yeah.
I read the third book, and then I think by the time the fourth came out, I'd forgotten most of it, so I needed to reread everything. And so I haven't done it yet, but I think I will. I also read it before I read Lord of the Rings. I've not seen any Star Wars.
Oh, so you didn't realize? Okay, yeah.
I enjoyed the book for its own thing, and I feel like I could be wrong about this, but I feel like I'd still like it very much if I read it, because there are some, the thing I said about quotes, there are some really beautiful lines in those books. There's one about the sea that I particularly like. But I think some of those are pretty well written, so I might enjoy it just for that.
No, I think Eragon and the Inheritance cycle in general is, first of all, Christopher Paolini wrote this when he was very young.
Yeah.
So, so kudos to him for doing that. I can't remember what I wrote when I was 15, and it wasn't that good. So good for him. But also, it is very much, there's a lot of Star Wars. And I think the Star Wars influence, if anything, is even deeper than the Tolkien influence. If I remember thinking, particularly with the first couple books, okay, that's a lot of Star Wars there. But also just kind of having fun. And I think if I was an adult when I read them, because I'm older than Christopher Paolini is. So, but I remember they were fun, and I thought to myself, these would have been great when I was a kid, just getting to love fantasy and that sort of thing. So, and I think it's fair also to say that he kind of goes more in his own direction in the third and fourth books.
Okay.
I think so. But yeah, of course, there's a lot of Lord of the Rings and Star Wars in there, and that it's not it doesn't take a genius to figure that out. But credit to him for creating a story that obviously millions of people have enjoyed. So
right, and I think it's mostly the story beats or like tropes that are influenced, I think, because the thing I love best about Aragorn is the relationship he has with his dragon, which I think is its own thing, right? I don't know.
Seraphina, do I remember that correctly?
Seraphina, I think. No, Saphira, sorry.
Saphira, yes.
Yeah, Saphira, yeah. But yes, that was the most special part to me. So if that's influence from anywhere, I don't know, but I think just for that, it's a great book. What else did I read? I think Inkheart. I only read the first book. I wanted to read more, but that's what I read during college. But anyway, the summary of my college reading was I read all over the place. I think that was all over. That was also the time when I discovered The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And I think it reminded me a lot of Woodhouse. So that made it more special to me. I love it for itself, but also because I think Woodhouse, Douglas Adams, and Terry Pratchett are the three authors I know who write almost entirely funny books without any I guess breaks from the humor. I think Erickson's humor also reminds me a little bit of these authors whenever he's like some interactions. But
I know that people often have said that, and Erickson is on the record as having not actually read, for example, Terry Pratchett, I think. But I see some similarities myself there, for sure. And I love the humor. The humor is so crucial. I
think my main comparison I would make is with Woodhouse, and probably for the sections that you mentioned with Theo and Bug. So probably that's why, and I sort of tie the three together in my head. So maybe that's why I compare Erickson to all three of them too. But
so can I ask you why? It sounds like you were reading a ton when you were in college. Were you actually a literature major or something like that? Or were you just doing this for fun on your own?
Just for fun. I was in I was getting a computer science degree. I just loved reading a lot. But what I did do, so my college, and I think there are a few others who do this, but I had to take 5 humanities courses, or was it a certain number of credits? I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I spent a bunch of them on literature courses. I got really lucky that at the time that I was in college, a few people were asked to come and teach some literature courses. So there was one called Partition Politics, Fragmented Nation, in which we studied a lot of literature written around the time of the Indian partition.
Oh, wow.
For like India and
Wow.
Pakistan partition. So we read some Saadat Hasan Manto, who wrote some really heartbreaking stories for the time. And we also read some Rabindranath Tagore. We read Home in the World, and we read Gora, which is a fascinating story about identity. And what else? Yeah, we read those 3 in that course. And then there's another course I took. I forget what it was called, but we studied 100 Years of Solitude in that course.
Nice.
Was fun. We also read Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Yeah.
Yep, I've read that too. Very important. Good read. Yeah. Good writer too, Achebe.
Yeah, I got to read the whole, I think it's a trilogy or some connected stories. I have to read the rest, but I think I also read Cry, the Beloved Country, but I can't remember if it was for the course or if it was just in the recommended reading from the course and I ended up reading it. But yeah, so I did take some literature courses, but they were not
Can I ask, did you read in that course, since it was about the partition and stuff, did you read Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children in there, or?
Yeah, so it wasn't taught in the course, but we had to do a book report for the final assignment, and I chose Midnight's Children.
Oh, you did? Okay. Yeah,
that was a lot of fun. I think that that may have been my first Salman Rushdie. My favorite is The Enchantress of Florence, though. I loved that book so much. Yeah. Oh, and Shalimar the Clown is brilliant as well. I liked. Yeah. But yes, did you have something to say about Midnight's Children? Sorry.
Oh, no, I have read it as well. And it's, talk about great humor. There's a ton of really excellent humor in there, and a lot of, I think it does help to have some awareness of history while reading that book. I think you'll get more from it if you have some knowledge of history and what happened at the time of the partition, and how the British just sort of said, okay, well, here's a line on a map, and good luck, everybody, and it was it's good to know the context, I think, to fully appreciate what Rushdie is doing in Midnight's Children. Very powerful and somehow humorous at the same time.
I did really love that book. I do want to read it again. So I don't know if I'm different in this, but I just don't remember a lot of the stories I read in a lot of detail. Maybe it's got something to do with, reading to find out what happens rather than thinking about it at depth. But it also means that when I reread a book, it's almost like reading it for the first time. So there's a lot of these things that I don't remember much about, but I just remember generically just loving the book. So
well, there are a lot of pickles in the book, right? Remember the pickle factory and all of that?
I think so. And there was something about Padma. There's a Padma character in there, but
yes.
Is that, I don't know, is that, I now know he had an ex-wife with the name Padma. I don't know if that's the same person, but
yeah. I'd have to go back. It's been a long time since I read it too.
Yeah.
But I remember feeling hungry with all the pickles in there. So.
Yeah. I think there's some references to post-partition history as well. I think the time when Indira Gandhi was prime minister. There's another book that did that. I think it's called The Great Indian Novel. Shashi Tharoor. He so it's basically, so Mahabharata is the great Indian epic, right?
Oh, I love that. I mean, I've read, I mean, it's not, I don't read Sanskrit, so I can't read the original, but I've read a translation, and what a fantastic epic that is. Yeah, just tremendous. Yeah.
I've been discussing that a lot with my husband lately, because I've had questions about how the people portrayed as heroes can
Yeah.
legitimately still be called heroes.
So true. So
yeah.
true. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's something that's happening, that's because of the portrayal in modern media about these people being heroes, or if it's in the main epic. So I'd like to read it and find out. I have never read a proper translation. I've just read, again, an abridged version. It's a
Yeah.
300-page long book with really big font.
Yeah. Well, there was, I think, for a lot of people in South Asia, and also maybe even abroad, the definitive version of the story is the TV series that was such a big cultural phenomenon, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I've seen some episodes of it. Just, yeah, it was something that everybody was watching at one time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there have been some new attempts at doing a TV series as well. But
Okay.
yeah, or maybe they were just remastered versions of the original. I don't remember. I think we used to watch it in Tamil because that's my mother tongue. And yeah, and my husband likes to quote dialogues from the Hindi one. And
Oh, okay.
so, yeah, I mean, it's a thing. I think I grew up with it as well. The Ramayana and Mahabharata TV
Yes.
shows based around them. I think, yeah, that was my main source of what happens. But also, I read, my uncle bought me abridged versions of the two epics. So I know, and I was very surprised to find the story start from this Shantanu, is that his name? Having he's married to a person who keeps drowning her children for reasons. I was surprised to find out that that's where the story started. I remember being surprised by that because all I knew were the Pandavas and the Kauravas. So,
Yes, that's the most famous thing, the war between these cousins and all that.
yeah,
That's the basic thing. But yeah, there's so much more to this huge, sprawling epic. Yeah, tremendous. And of course, you know, it contains some of the most famous episodes like the Bhagavad Gita and all of that. So it's something that we talk about certain fantasy series like Malazan, which have so many layers to them. But you, in the Mahabharata, you also have, you know, you have humor, you have epic stuff, you have philosophy, you have religion, you have just every tragedy, you have everything is contained in this. And it's just so massive and so culturally important too, but as a story, it's really something, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. I think I only know, I believe that the Kaurava Pandava relationship and all of that, it's a pretty small portion of the epic, or at least it's like in the second half of it or something like that. So even just that much, it has so much intrigue and interesting moral dilemma and whatnot. So yeah, I definitely agree that there's definitely a lot of great discussion for it.
So many iconic characters too, like Draupadi and Arjun and Bhim and all these, you know, these are iconic characters. And of course, Krishna is in there as well, right? So,
and Karna, I think, is someone that I recently got interested in. I didn't pay him too much mind when I was reading as a child, but recently I think Karna has become a really interesting character for me. I think, I was reading The Palace of Illusions, which by Chitra Banerjee. It's so it's basically a retelling of the Mahabharata from Draupadi's point of view.
Oh, neat. Wow.
Events surrounding her. And it's pretty interesting. And I was telling my husband, you know, with all these mythological retellings that are becoming really famous and popular, I think Draupadi's character is like ripe for the taking. And it turns out there's already a book based on her. I think it was published in early 2000s or 2009 or something like that. So it's not even recent. It's been around for a while.
Wow, somebody's done this already. Wow. And for anyone out there who's not heard of Draupadi, who's a major important character in the Mahabharata, who's a woman who's married to 5 husbands. So that's the basic thing that, you know, that little factoid, which sort of gets people to, really? Oh, that's interesting. There's a lot more to her story than that, of course. But so great. And I know that there are authors now in South Asia and perhaps in other places who are being inspired by this tremendous epic. I'm going to be reading one soon myself called Sons of Darkness.
Mm-hmm.
What's the guy's name? Gaurav
Gaurav Mohanty.
So I'm excited to try that because I think he's been very explicit that the fact that the Mahabharata is an influence, and I think Malazan as well. So
I think he's named it.
Yeah, have you read it yet? Sons of
I
Darkness?
have started it. I've got about 7 or 8 chapters in. I've got to make more progress. I made some really bad reading decisions lately. I Malazan and Curse of the Mistwraith and a couple of other big books all at the same time. So it just means that some books I take longer to come back to when I put them down. But
give yourself a Discworld book or something.
Gotta take some breaks in between. So I mean, when I said bad reading decisions, I mean in terms of how much I pick up, not what, because I've been loving everything I read. So.
Yes, of course. Yeah. I'm exactly the same. I do that all the time. I bite off more than I can chew when it comes to reading, and that's why whenever I do a TBR video, I always say this is highly aspirational.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't do TBRs. I just pick up what I feel like reading, and sometimes it means that I stop halfway through a book to pick up something else that I'm in the mood for, and then I'll go back to the book I put down eventually, but sometimes it might be months. I've been reading Toll the Hounds for like 4 months now. So
it's not a fast read. It is not a book that I read fast, and I'm glad that I didn't, because I feel like I got more out of it that way. It's an incredible book, and it's different from all the other Malazan books in the sense that I don't know if I've ever read anything quite as moving for me in terms of the exploration of grief and love and how these two intertwine with one another and actually depend on one another, because you can't have love without grief, right? You can't have grief without love. So it's really, I find it to be an incredibly important book for me. But I would agree that it's not a quick read. It's certainly not for me.
I think the other Malazan book I think maybe I took less time with Dead House Gates, but that one was another one that I took a really long time to read because it was a lot of difficult events, and I had to sort of make up my mind to pick it up each time. And but I mean, it was worth it, of course. But you have to be in a certain headspace to be able to pick that up.
I think it's important to engage with books that do that to us sometimes, to be challenged in that way, and to think about, that's why I think stories exist, is one of the major reasons is to help us to struggle with our pain and our suffering, but also to celebrate our triumphs and our joys. So
absolutely. I did have a question about the grief themes in Malazan. Is it mostly in the last book? Because I mean, there is some grief, but it doesn't seem to be as much of or maybe it's subtle enough that I'm missing it. There are other things that I noticed more in Toll the Hounds, and which sort of mean more to me than the grief themes, I guess. But I was curious about that. Is it throughout the book, or am I just really missing it throughout the book, or is it mainly in the parts that I haven't gotten to yet?
I think it'll be much more clear to you when you finish the book.
Okay.
And I really shouldn't say more than that, because there would be massive spoilers. I kind of spoiled myself a little bit with I clicked on a fantasy subreddit thread. No.
And to be fair, it was marked as a spoiler, and I figured it's probably about a character that I don't know about, and I clicked on it, and I know how it's going to end. So you do. So you do know. Okay. So, but knowing is one thing, but reading it is another, and it is, of course. And I know this because I've read it twice. So the second time I knew what was going to happen, and I still bawled when it happened. That makes sense. I think that was also a reason why I'm reading the book so slowly, because I guess I don't want it to come. And since you know what's going to happen,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I'm reading more into everything in that portion of the story. Yeah, so anyway, I have 100 pages left. I put it down in the middle of a really intense sequence, and
Oh,
I
wow.
haven't picked it up yet. And I did that 3 weeks ago. I have to pick it up again, and maybe I'll finish it in one shot this time. But yeah, I'm looking forward to finishing that.
Yeah, if you do decide to do any kind of review or video on the experience, I will certainly be curious to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I think I'll have to decide how to split it out, but there's a lot I want to talk about with Toll the Hounds. Yeah, definitely I'm gonna do that. I think we got here from talking about the great Indian novel.
Yes, we did somehow. Yeah, it's great.
That's awesome.
So,
I love that.
no, it's wonderful. That's why we're here. Were there any other important books, though, in your reading journey in terms of who you are? We got pretty got some good ones in there. But I want to make sure you get a chance to mention all the ones that you feel are very special for you. So.
Oh yeah. So I think we'll skip ahead to my three recent 4 to 5 years. Like I did read a lot of really good books between when I graduated college and about until say 2017. But I was reading about a book every 3 months or something. I was really slow with it, and mainly because I was reading a lot of literary fiction, and that while they're excellent books, they tend to bum you out. So
Yes,
I was
it's
reading,
true.
I was reading like 5 pages a night and things like that. So I wasn't reading very much, but I did have some excellent books there, like Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. I think I have some more Salman Rushdie I read during that time as well. Sandman I read when I was doing my master's. I was doing an internship and there was a library that had them all, and I devoured the series in a week or so. I think that's a little bit of a disservice to the comics. I think I've got to read them more carefully because I think they were excellent. I remember absolutely nothing. I haven't seen the show yet because I want to.
Oh, I was just about to ask if you had watched the show or not. Yeah.
I do want to, but I'm gonna reread some of the comics first because I like for shows that are based on books I know or have want to read, I will read first before I watch them. Yeah. I didn't watch the Lord of the Rings movies until I read the books, which was nearly 7 or 8 years after they came out. And then I binge watched them in one night. But,
oh, wow. All 3 movies. Wow. That's awesome.
That was a 12-hour marathon. I think I watched the uncut version, the 3 or 4 hour movies.
Wait, you watched all 3 movies, the longer versions in one night. So that's like 10 hours of.
Yeah. So I lived alone for a long time. So my favorite time pass was to read when I had an interesting enough book that would keep me going, or just watch hours of TV. Yeah.
Wow. Well, so we have to talk about both of these. So first we mentioned the Sandman, which of course you haven't watched the show yet, but I watched the show and thought to myself, why haven't I read these books yet? And this is fantastic storytelling. And I really enjoyed the show a lot. I thought it was really well done. And I think most fans of the graphic novel enjoyed the show. So I actually bought some of the comics that this season is based on. So I'm looking forward to reading those. But as far as the Lord of the Rings goes, good for you for reading the books first and then letting yourself watch the films. So having done that, what did you think? How would you compare book to film in your experience?
So I think I really loved the movies. I thought they were pretty faithful to the books. When the Harry Potter movies came out, I think I was a little like the Wheel of Time fans who are nitpicking at things that aren't in line with the books. I just did not like the movies at all.
The Harry Potter movies. Okay.
No, I did not like how much was left out, but I was also young and snooty, so I might.
Particularly, I think as the films progressed, because the books got longer, so it was harder to include. I feel like the first film is very close to the book, but
Yeah.
then it gets harder and harder and they lose characters and threads.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
yeah. Which is, adaptations have to do that. They can't. I mean, for a small book like the first Harry Potter book, Harry Potter and did you read it as the Sorcerer's Stone or the Philosopher's Stone?
Philosopher's Stone.
Okay, yeah. So you had the British version, yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, it's a relatively small book, so you can adapt it fairly closely. And I think,
Yeah.
but as the books got bigger, it probably got a lot harder to do that.
Yeah, it did. And so I was like really disappointed with the Harry Potter books. I think mainly because of how much they left out, which I guess makes sense. But, I was, I guess, what was I, 15, 18, whatever, getting upset for not seeing what I wanted on the screen. But when I watched Lord of the Rings, I did not feel like that. I had just finished the books and I was deeply in love with them. But I felt like they were really faithful to the text and they had all the events that I cared about. So yeah, I was happy with it.
It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, they of course did leave out things too. Poor Tom Bombadil and always, he got cut. And they did leave out things, but I think a lot of people would agree with you. Not all, but a lot of fans of the book would agree with you that they somehow not only reproduced a lot of the narrative, but they got the feel of Middle Earth. They got the, and I don't think it's quite as reverent as Tolkien's text, but they have reverence in there. That they do convey reverence in I think there's more emphasis on the action in the films. So they dial down on the reverence and they increase the action, the pace. But that said, I feel like this was definitely these films were made by serious fans of Lord of the Rings, and they did their very best. And they, I watched not only the theater versions and the extended versions, but I also watched all the behind the scenes stuff.
Oh yeah.
Came with the DVDs and all that, how they made this, and I was deeply impressed with the effort put into that. I mean, I don't know how many films have gone through so much to try to get the right feel. So
I really loved the movies. I think I saw The Fellowship of the Ring when I was in school when it first came out, but at the time I didn't know they were based on books. When I did, I was like, I'm gonna wait until I finish reading them, and that took a while. I was gonna say something. Yeah, the soundtrack of the movies I really loved.
Oh, Howard Shore's soundtrack.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I think I listened to it for a long time afterwards. I still do sometimes. I like to listen to soundtrack when I code, so I have a big list of music.
I have the DVDs myself. I don't know if you probably stream it or something like most normal people today.
I used to use Spotify. Now I use Google Music. So yeah, it's easy to make playlists and things like that.
Or CDs. Did I say DVD? Yeah, I have the CDs anyway.
Yeah, I think I used to have cassette tapes at some point.
Oh wow, good. Yeah.
So yeah, I think college was all CDs. My aunt was here the other day and she was telling me that I made her a mixed CD with some music. And I was like, oh, I did. I don't remember how those work anymore.
That brings back the memories. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this was some of the music that I really loved. So I think the music added a lot of character to the stories as well.
Oh, yes. No doubt about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for the Harry Potter movies, the 6th and 7th movies had some really great music. The one for Obliviate, it's called Obliviate. That one's beautiful, and I love that. And I thought it's what the movie starts with. I think it's the 7th movie. Sorry, I was saying
7th movie. Yeah.
7th and 8th movies. The 7th movie starts with that soundtrack, and I thought it set the tone really beautifully. So
yeah, bit darker tone, bit more grim. Yeah.
So anyway,
cool. No, you're so right. I think the soundtrack is often something that while we're experiencing the film, we're not thinking about, but it is having such a vast impact on our experience of the story. Yeah. And I love music myself. When I dream at night, I dream with music. I have a soundtrack going on all
Oh,
the
that's
time.
so cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's not normal. I think
I
I'm weird, but I have a lot of love for music. I'm not a professional musician. I'm not that well trained in music, but I love music. And
mhm.
it's strange to me because I've said this to people a few times that I actually dream with music most of the time playing in my whatever is going on there. I mean, I have a soundtrack going on. So
That is
uh,
so cool. I wish my dreams did that.
yeah, I think if somebody out there has soundtracks with their dreams, please tell me, because I think I must be a real weirdo here.
Yeah, I mean, it's
But,
a really cool weirdo. If that is weird, I think
uh,
it's a really cool kind of weird. I only remember colors from my dream. I don't even know if I get voices in my dream. I mean, there are words, but I don't remember voices from my dreams, just colors. Just lots of
Interesting.
colors.
Yeah. And it's usually music that I never heard before. So some part of my brain is composing music while I sleep.
Maybe you're a reborn musician of some sort. I like to,
Maybe that would be cool if
yeah.
I'm a reincarnation of some musician, hopefully a happy one.
Hopefully. Yeah, I like to I sort of vaguely believe in reincarnation, and I like to look up people who died the year I was born to see if might be anyone famous.
It is something I think that's fun to think about. Yeah, the idea.
um,
I'm a fan of a lot of aspects of you know, Hinduism and Buddhism, and the idea that I probably don't have a literal belief in reincarnation, but I think there's a lot of beauty in the idea that we are connected with other people, and we are connected with the past, and we are part of this vast tapestry of life. And I think that the idea of me somehow embodying the spirit of some, past, I think that's cool. I think there's a lot that resonates with me in that. I never thought of myself as being perhaps like some other old soul is now in this body or something. But who knows? I certainly don't know, right? I don't know.
Yeah. I think that was the other thing that I did with my non-computer science required credits. I took a bunch of cognitive science courses.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Huh.
So I want to at some point do some deep study of consciousness and whatnot. But during that time, those were some of my favorite courses to take.
So I have to ask you now, if you have read this book that was written in the 1970s by Douglas Hofstadter, and it's called Gödel, Escher, Bach, an Eternal Golden Braid. And it's by this guy who's really, I mean, he has so many realms that he's very knowledgeable in. But it's interesting because I think programmers are the ones who really know a lot about this book, because there's a lot of early programming stuff in it. But as the title suggests, Gödel was a mathematician, Escher was an artist, Bach was a musician, and it's all about consciousness. It's this book about consciousness and where is it, how does it exist, and that sort of thing. So have you encountered that book before?
I have been meaning to read it. I have a copy somewhere there, but
you do? Okay.
I do want to read it at some point. That and The Emperor's New Mind are two books that I have been meaning to read and failing to pick up for a long time. But yes, they are high on my list. I don't read a lot of nonfiction, or I'm not usually in the mood for nonfiction, because a lot of reading for me is for entertainment at the end of a long day. So when I'm in the mood, I do intend to pick those up. But yeah, those are books that I've been meaning to read for a long time.
Cool.
We studied Gödel's theorems in class, so I guess that will help reading it a little bit.
Oh my goodness, you'll probably understand those parts of the books much better than I did, because to be very honest with you, I didn't mind math too much, but I didn't do a ton with math. And by the time I read this book, I was old and I had forgotten most of the math. So those were the parts I struggled with, where he was talking about the math, but I got enough of it to grasp what was, the point. And the Escher parts and the Bach parts were really cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got to get it high up on my list. I think Ralph Bluetext was also mentioning that it's a book that he wanted to read. He said that Terry Pratchett was influenced by it, which is interesting.
Well, that is cool. I did not know that Terry Pratchett was influenced by that book. Somehow it does not surprise me, though.
Yeah. There's I'm rereading the Discworld books, and there's a really cool joke about atoms and them having a big effect on the universe, but not much changing on the planet itself. And anyway, I think he seems pretty well read in a lot of the scientific and cosmological stuff that I'm interested in myself. So
very cool. And it's funny because it is a book, while it seems like the people who read it love to talk about it, it seems to be strangely not referenced very much outside of the people who've read it. It has had strangely little influence on other people who write about consciousness and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's strange that, but the premise is that consciousness, I mean, one of the most important premises in there is that consciousness is a result of these things he calls strange loops. It's really cool. You go down this real rabbit hole in the book, which is, I mean, it's something to think about. We don't really have a consensus about what consciousness is, where it resides, where it goes. Right? We don't have a consensus from any perspective, from a scientific or even religious perspective, I think. So,
I think there's a lot of, at least in the neuroscience fields, it seems to be that, if we understand how everything in the brain works, we'll understand consciousness. And I think one of the main areas of research to figure out consciousness is memory. I was reading In Search of Memory by Eric Kandel.
Cool.
I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but he won the Nobel Prize for figuring out a lot of where memory resides and research around that area. But the book ended with, hey, I don't know how consciousness works, and it's going to be a long journey to get there. So that I think we don't know a lot about consciousness. That's why I'm not opposed to the idea of reincarnation, because I feel like we know less enough about it that is a possibility.
Yeah, fair enough. I think, absolutely. We can't say definitively no, because we don't. This is a whole realm we don't understand. So it's really cool. Another book that I read was Robert Sapolsky's Behave, which he's a neuroscientist, and he does delve into other realms as well in the process of he's looking at it more from the perspective of, does free will exist, and it was a book that the more I read of it, I was like, well, I guess I'm just very predictable here. I don't have any really free will left.
I think there was some research a long time ago, or several years ago, where they found that the neural circuits that ask the hand to move go off several seconds before the hand moves, or something like that.
Yeah, before you realize you're telling your hand to move, there's stuff happening already. That's
that's crazy, right?
Really?
Yeah.
So who's making my hand move?
There was also a paper that I stumbled upon. I don't know what I was looking for, but there was a paper that measured people weighed people at the moment that they died, and they found that the weight reduced a little bit. I don't remember what the outcome was, but I guess that's probably the weight of consciousness or something. But
maybe that's an old thesis. I've heard of that from way back. Yeah, people were trying to figure out if somebody's the experiments have been done as way back. I think at least 19th, maybe 18th century, where people were trying to weigh the soul and that sort of thing. When somebody dies, and is there a little weight loss here?
Yeah. there might be a non-consciousness reason for that. But anyway, I stumbled upon that paper that I found that fascinating. But there's probably an explanation paper for it that I haven't read yet. Again, I forgot how we got here.
Oh, it's been a fun path, however we got here, though. So you've read a lot about you like to read nonfiction and science and about the brain, and that's
mostly science. I read one about, I think it was called Finding Neutrinos. There's one that I'm reading now called The God Particle, which by Leonard Adleman. I think that's his name. I believe he's the scientist who coined the term the God particle for the Higgs boson.
Yes. Cool.
Yeah. So that's pretty interesting. I'm working my way through that. And
I'm also curious because you obviously have expertise in the realm of computers and such. So how much do you think we can learn about ourselves with about consciousness through AI and that sort of thing? Is that do you think that's a promising direction, or is it frightening actually to think about what could happen with AI?
So it's actually really interesting. So with there's areas of the brain that process different inputs, right? There's a visual cortex, which I believe is somewhere in the back.
In the back, yeah.
And there's auditory cortex somewhere. I forget where it is, but anyway, the visual cortex. I was reading a book by a bunch of scientists who performed a lot of experiments on cats. So there's areas where some neurons. I think there's 2 or 3 different layers of the visual cortex. The first layer, if I'm remembering correctly, just processes lines and curves, and then the next one puts images together, and the layer after that, and then there's some connection off to memory somewhere to help us actually recognize the image, right? And with artificial neural networks, if we train neurons, so the equation for neuron, are you familiar with that? So there's basically a neuron can be modeled as a mathematical equation with some activation energy, and if it gets a certain amount of electrical input, then it'll go off. If not,
it fires. Yeah,
it fires. Yes, thank you.
Through the synapses and stuff.
Through the synapses. So you can model an individual neuron and then put together a network of neurons. And so the neural networks that are trained to recognize images, they sort of work in the same sort of layering scheme with, they recognize lines first, and then the next layer recognizes curves and so on. So I forget how they broke down what recognizes what, but the final output is recognizing the image, right?
Okay.
So with that sense, I think if we have a big enough neural network that can model everything the brain can do, maybe consciousness will emerge. But the hypothesis there will be that, consciousness is just a result of your brain, which is a reasonable assumption, but we don't know where in the brain it is. So I guess if it ties up with memory, and if it's sort of a global phenomenon, if they can, in theory, potentially replicate all of the brain, I'm guessing maybe consciousness might happen. But this was really interesting to me. I do not necessarily think that strong AI can be a thing. Strong AI is where you can have consciousness emerge. And I'm very skeptical about that idea, but this analyzing the neural networks, the artificial neural networks, they work exactly the same or very similarly to the visual cortex, the way it is organized. I think the missing piece would be to tie it up into your accumulated memory and experience. I don't know how that would work for.
That is just precisely the thing, though, isn't it? Because when you look at the level of the neurons, you can see them firing and that they work as in little aggregates here and there and that sort of thing. But you cannot, when you're at that level, see, okay, there's where consciousness is, right?
Yeah.
Where is the you in all these networks of neurons and neurons in here? There is nowhere you can just point and say, there's consciousness, right? They're just doing their thing. They're firing when they get a certain amount of input. and passing it on to the other neurons that are connected to them in their network. And
Yeah.
it's a very physiological thing, right?
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. And memory, I think, from that book that I was telling you about, In Search of Memory, it doesn't seem to be a localized phenomenon. It's not here's where all memory is. I think potentially each area of the cortex, like the visual cortex has visual memory, and the auditory cortex probably has auditory memory, and so on. Again, I could be misremembering all of this, but this is what I vaguely remember.
And if you think of a human being as, one way of looking at us in terms of our identity, who we are, is basically a collection of memories, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But we don't really know what memories are, where they live. And certainly we seem to realize that they're not very reliable. That we're constantly tweaking them. So that means the basis of our identity is basically a narrative. It's a fiction that we're constantly playing with, right?
Yeah. And sometimes we consciously arrange our identity, and other times it's, I guess, a sort of emerging aspect of all our experiences, right? So that's, I find the subject fascinating, and I did want to get a degree in neuroscience at some point, but it did not work out. But at some point later, but I am now figuring out that the degree I probably should get should be in philosophy, because in neuroscience they're not putting things together; they're more getting into the nitty-gritties, and then I guess philosophers are collecting the data and figuring out what to do with it. So maybe that's what I'll study at some point.
Oh, how cool. Wow. Yeah, well, it sounds like you've done very well for yourself already. But that would be a lot of fun. Yeah. Wow, my goodness. It is a lot to think about. And these kinds of things do work their way into fiction, as we were talking. I was thinking of books like Hyperion by Dan Simmons, for example. I don't know if you've read that or not, but
I have not. It's on the list. I have a 1,500 long want to read list on Goodreads. So
yeah. I mean, he was talking about this stuff, AI and consciousness stuff, much earlier than a lot of other people. I forget exactly when Hyperion was published, but it's surprisingly old, and he seemed to be on point with a lot of what he was doing.
Yeah. I think,
very cool.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yep.
I was reading Becky Chambers, the second book in her Wayfarer series. The first one is called The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. Maybe you've heard of that one. But it's a series of 4 books, and the second one, it explores the idea of a sentient AI and where they can get identity from, or what aspects of their being constitute identity. I thought that was pretty interesting. Even if strong AI is not possible, just exploring the, I guess, the moral and philosophical ramifications of that, I think, is brilliant. Oh, you know what I loved? Never Let Me Go. That it wasn't about AI, but a completely different subject, by Kazuo Ishiguro. That one is, I won't tell you what it's about. If you want to check it out, telling you what it's about will be spoilery, but it does deal a lot with, I guess, moral aspects of certain kinds of people.
Yeah, I think he likes to talk about memory a lot in his books. So it was The Buried Giant. Didn't he write The Buried Giant?
Yes.
I think so, right? I read that, and that is a book that is all about memory.
Oh, interesting.
And it's a fantasy too. It's actually fantasy, but it is the theme, the heart of the book is, what is memory? What is the nature of memory? If you take away memory, what becomes of the person whose identity was premised on those memories? It's a pretty cool book, actually. It's not like a action-packed kind of read, but
I like those.
Yeah. That's is something that, so he seems to like that theme a lot. I think is memory and identity and that sort of thing. So
I've got to check out The Buried Giant. I read this, and I forget the other one I read. It's about the butler who reminisces about his life.
The Remains of the Day.
Yes, that one. Yeah. But yeah, this one I've been meaning to check out, and his latest book, Clara and the Sun. I'm gonna read those as well.
Yeah, cool. Wow. So yeah, you do read all over the place, don't you?
I do. I do. I mean, so I read The Dark Tower, The Wheel of Time, and about both of N.K. Jemisin's trilogies. And then I started Malazan before I realized that what I like best is fantasy. I didn't realize I was reading in a specific genre. I just kept looking for series because I like to spend a long time in a world. It's why I also prefer TV shows to movies, because I can just keep going back to the same story every day. But so I always kept looking for series. I didn't realize that all the series that I was reading happened to be fantasy. I only figured that out when I watched Murphy Napier and Daniel Green's video on they ordered books by like beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And I realized I'd either read all of the series or I wanted to read them. And I'm like, I'm reading fantasy.
You're a fantasy reader. Yeah.
That's when I doubled down and said, oh, I want to read more fantasy. And I think sci-fi also.
Yeah,
I loved, but I do read all over the place. The fantasy localization is pretty recent. I think the last 3 years, because I realized that's where my favorite books are, or most of my favorite books are. But I was reading a lot of literary fiction, just anything that sounded interesting.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Jenny Wirtz's The Wars of Light and Shadow earlier. Also, Realm of the Elderlings. Have you read that one yet?
I have not. So I started Malazan nearly 2 years ago, and I've been saving Realm of the Elderlings for when I finish Malazan. Yeah.
So in the future, perhaps there might be some Realm of the Elderlings content on your channel.
Oh yeah, I hope so. I definitely want to pick that up. And I think it's nice. I'm not a very well-read fantasy reader. I've read 7 or 8 book series. The most well-known ones, I think. So it'll be nice now that I have a channel to sort of go read the booktube fantasy canon. Like I haven't read John Gwynne or Joe Abercrombie. They are authors I want to check out. So it'll be nice.
I love them both. I've recently finished all of John Gwynn's published books, and I've read everything First Law by Joe Abercrombie, and those are Abercrombie, particularly First Law, was not something I read as a young kid, but as I was trying to expand my own fantasy reading, because I was very much a Tolkien nut when I was young. And so I thought, let's read some more stuff. And First Law was, I can't remember exactly when, but I read it well before I started my channel. So I don't have, I did actually reread the First Law trilogy shortly before starting the channel. And then I read more recently, of course, I had read the standalones and everything else too. The one thing I hadn't read actually was the short story collection, Sharp Ends. And of course, the new trilogy, which I love, I think is his best work to date. The Age of Madness trilogy. For me, that is my favorite First Law stuff, where he just gets better as a writer, like a lot of writers. The more you do something, you get better at it. I feel like the Age of Madness has the best female characters that Abercrombie has ever written. And of course, he does everything else beautifully, like he always does, the humor and the action and everything else. But there are more different types of action going on in Age of Madness. There's different types of tension going on there. And he's successfully, I think, and deliberately woven in more theme into the Age of Madness than previously he had done with his other stuff. So I think there's more meat actually in Age of Madness than in his other books.
Cool. That sounds really fascinating. These are all authors that I've saved for my post Malazan reading. Although I'm beginning to think I might pick some of them up sooner, because I'll probably divide up based on how Told the Hounds went. It's probably going to take me to mid 2023 to finish Malazan.
So, I mean, I'm going to guess that maybe, well, who knows? I mean, you should read what is good for you. But I will say that for me, The Crippled God, which is the 10th book, and really, honestly, Dust of Dreams and The Crippled God is really one story. much more so than all of the 10 books are, of course, a series.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at it in terms of really literally, when you read Dust of Dreams, this is unusual in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. You really have to pick up right away. The story just goes right into the crippled god. It's the only, Dust of Dreams is the only book that doesn't feel like, I mean, it does have kind of sort of a climax and an ending of a sort, but there's so much that you just go right into a crippled god. So that you may find yourself wanting to just keep going, like a lot of people do. But yeah, it's exciting to me to see somebody who's at that stage in Malazan. Yeah, I'll certainly look forward to hearing your thoughts. So what else is up next for you reading wise? What else are you intending to cover on the channel in the near future?
So I just finished The Forgotten Beasts of Eld by Patricia McKillip. And
nice.
That was a beautiful story that I want to make a video about. I haven't had the time yet. So probably gonna do a video about it in the next couple of weeks. And then The Color of Magic. So I'm rereading Terry Pratchett. So I read the first 5 books of the Discworld series, and I found out that the audiobooks were being remade. And so I started with the audiobooks again. And I think most of them are coming out mid-2023. So I figured I'll reread the ones the one I was on, the audiobook for it isn't going to be out until April. So I'm rereading them on audio, which is also nice because then I can maybe make videos about individual books. Both of those will probably be spoiler videos because I want to talk in detail about some quotes that I really liked from the books and all the jokes that I enjoyed. I want to talk about them. How
many of the Discworld books have you already read? I
have read 6, I think. Yeah, I read the first 6. I'm just reading them in publication
order. You're reading
them
in publishing order?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm reading, so I read 6. I was about to start Pyramids, but then I found out about the audiobooks. And I listened to a snippet of Weird Sisters. The audiobook is done by Indira Varma. It was brilliant. All the jokes were so much more funny to hear her say them. So
Indira Varma read the narrating. Oh, how cool.
Yeah, she was in the Game of Thrones.
She was playing a character in the Game of Thrones series. Yep. I've seen her in a few things actually.
Yeah. I haven't seen her in anything. I haven't seen her as an actress, but I've been listening to, I haven't gotten to Weird Sisters yet, but I found other audiobooks by her that I could potentially enjoy. So I read The Secret Garden when I was young, and I'm listening to it again on audio now. And she's such a fantastic narrator. Anyway, I'm reading, cool. She's done all the Witches books in the Discworld audiobooks.
I did not know this. Wow.
So, and Colin Morgan has done all the Rincewind books. I think Colin Morgan is also an actor. He did Merlin I don't know if you know about the BBC show Merlin.
I might have heard of it. I haven't seen the whole thing though. Yeah,
he played Merlin in that show. I liked it the first time I watched it. It did not age well for me as someone who has had some bad managers. It was a fun show to watch, but anyway, I really like the actor and he's done a fantastic job with the Rincewind books. Anyway, I'll probably do the Discworld books. And
nice. And just so people know, if they don't know who Indira Varma is, she played Ilaria Sand in the Game of Thrones series as among her other roles. So probably most people around here will recognize her from that. But anyway.
And I guess I'll try to make progress with the Wars of Light and Shadow, and I'm gonna make more Malazan videos, I guess. And I don't have anything else outlined. I have about 16 CDs that I'm in the middle of.
16, wow.
So if I finish any of them, I might make a video. If I feel like I want to talk about it a lot, then I might make videos about them. Other than that, I think after I finish these big series, or maybe even in between, I plan to work my way through people like John Gwynne and Joe Abercrombie. I did read the YA series that Joe Abercrombie wrote.
Oh, you've read that? I have
Mhm.
not read that. So how did you like it?
I enjoyed it. It was pretty nice. I think the second book was my favorite, but I did like all three of them a lot. The first book was a lot of fun. I loved all the characters in the first book. And then it was interesting how by book 3, I did not like them very much.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And I think that was by design and not, so I like what he did with the characters and how they grew. We have a 15-year-old boy who grows into a man who has to make some tough decisions. So I really enjoyed it. So I think I read that because I wanted to wait for the first law series after Malazan, but I thought I'll get a taste of his writing, kind of like you did with To Ride Hell's Chasm. So anyway, so I read that and that was fun. So I'm looking forward to the first law. What else? I think I've got more. So Jani Wirtz wrote a thread. She posted a thread on the fantasy subreddit in which she listed a bunch of semi-forgotten authors who aren't very well talked about now, or like just like completely forgotten in the most of the review spheres. So I have a lot of old authors, older like 80s, 90s authors that I want to check out off of her list. So I'm going. Patricia McKillip was in that list.
I was just going to say that probably was why you read Patricia McKillip. Who I actually want to read at some point too.
Yeah, The Forgotten Beast of El was fantastic. I loved that story so much. And it helps that all of her books are like short and standalones as well. So they'll be good breaks between series, I think. I forget other authors on that list, but I'll probably work my way through them.
So you'll use her list as a for to figure out some. That's great. I think that's great because one thing I try to do on my channel is to cover self-published books, which is another realm where authors often don't get the attention they deserve. But that is also something that is most worthy of, I think, promoting and talking about on this platform, which is older authors who've written some fantastic books that aren't talked about anymore, right? So many of those actually, and that would be a good thing for us to devote ourselves to as well. So good for you for doing that, and good for Jenny Wirtz for posting that thread as well. I think she put something like that on Twitter as well.
There was and I think at least the second half of the post, it was about how a lot of the things that we find new and fantastic or like fresh have been done before, like things like sentient forest and some special, I think what is it called, A Memory Called Empire, I think is a lot like The Foreigner by CJ Cherry, if I'm saying her name correctly.
I know what you're talking about.
So it's just a lot of these themes or story concepts have been done before. So if you enjoy these books, then you can consider checking these out as well. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I discovered by CJ Cherry this trilogy called I forget what the trilogy is called, but it's 3 stories based on Russian folklore. I really loved the Winter Night trilogy, and I wanted more stories based in Russian folklore, and I discovered this, but it's out of print. I had to go find used copies of it, and there aren't even ebooks as far as I remember. So it's kind of sad that a lot of these stories that could potentially gain a lot of momentum in the fantasy appreciation environment we have now, they're kind of maybe some of them will come back in if enough people talk about them, but stories that I want to pick up as well. I think that's the older
awesome. It is, and you're right, it is sad to think about how many great stories are neglected now, and it's a bit like losing some of your memories. And so good for you for trying to bring some of these back. I think that's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I also think the writing style gels with me more, like the older, more formal style of writing. I think I
Slightly archaic,
enjoy
maybe. Yeah.
yeah, I think I enjoy that a bit more. I do love the current easy to read published stories. I absolutely do love them, but I also like the feeling of being lost in a world that's not our own, like the current language that can be a little bit of like staggering both worlds, but yeah.
Well, you're preaching to the choir now, because I grew up on Tolkien, and so my idea of fantasy is very much in line with what you're saying, where there is a slightly archaic language that lets us know as readers, we're not in this world, we're in
Yeah.
some other, this is Middle Earth, or this is some other place where we're going to have an adventure. And for me, it's jarring even today, although I've read plenty of these, but it's a little bit jarring for me. And it's a bit of an adjustment, to be honest with you. When I read fantasy that's supposed to be in a different, in an older type of world, but they're talking like we are now, and they're saying, what's up, dude, or whatever. And it's just kind of like, that doesn't work for me.
Definitely.
So yeah, I'm with you, absolutely. And of course, the essay that I feel like everyone should read on this subject is Ursula Le Guin's From Elfland to Poughkeepsie, which is a brilliant statement about, to me anyway, I agree with it. I did a video on it and everything. It's a brilliant statement about what you can achieve by through the prose, and that the story is the prose. The world exists because of the prose. And she gives some great examples, I think, in that essay of the contrast between a story with a slightly older language that tells you we're not in our world, versus a story that's supposedly fantasy but uses very colloquial language. So yeah, I'm definitely with you there.
Yeah, I don't think I've read that essay. I think you did a different Ursula Le Guin essay video, which I did go look up and read, but this one I think I've even had trouble finding. Do you know where I can find it?
Which one? The Why Are Americans Afraid of Dragons, or From Elfland to Poughkeepsie?
Elfland to Poughkeepsie. I read the other one.
Yeah, so I just Googled and found it online. And it actually, if you go to the video I made on it, there is I think a link in the description that should take, if assuming that is live, the website where I got it myself. Yeah, so you try it that way. It's a great little read, I think, and the definitive essay on this topic. Although I think Tolkien talked about it somewhat too, but Le Guin I don't actually agree with all the examples in her essay, though. Some of them are too archaic, where it inhibits, I think, most readers' ability to understand what's going on. If you can go too far that way as well. It's a bit of a tightrope, really, as a fantasy writer. You don't want to go too archaic, because nobody's going to know what the heck you're saying. And on the other hand, or they'll have to work hard to understand, and you don't want that. You want your reader to be immersed. The other side is the one that I find jarring, which is, please don't have your characters talking like they're around right now, that I could talk to my neighbor the same way, So there's a very fine, I think, medium, a happy place there in terms of fantasy prose, which is not an easy thing to pull off.
Right? I absolutely agree. I think, I don't know, maybe I could be wrong about this, but Brandon Sanderson feels like a bit of a middle ground between the two.
Maybe. Yeah, I think for a lot of people would find his prose to be so, I suppose. For me, because of probably who I am, and I not speak of Tolkien. I mean, I wrote my dissertation on William Morris, who's even more, he's 19th century, and he used very archaic prose. So for me, even Brandon Sanderson can be a little bit too colloquial sometimes, but I think I'm probably in the minority on that one.
The first time I read Brandon Sanderson, I think I was coming off of some other series which used more formal language, and I did get a little put off by it, but then I listened to the books on audio, and it didn't bother me quite as much the second time around. So I was able to appreciate the plot elements more than the language. but yeah, I think he doesn't feel too far in the colloquial direction to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I think with Sanderson, he's mainly making his books accessible, right?
Yeah,
And he's
yeah.
not trying to craft, brilliant prose or anything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, he's writing these books at an incredible rate too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's getting out the story essentially.
Yeah.
He's doing and doing obviously a great job at it. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I think an example of a writer to me who gets the balance right for today's audience would be George R.R. Martin, actually. He uses actually quite a lot of archaic language, but in a way that is accessible for modern reader. I think most people reading it aren't struggling to get what's going on. He's just sprinkles in just the right number of archaic words, and messes around with word order sometimes to give us a sense of these are like medieval knights and that sort of thing. And it's completely artificial. Nobody ever talked the way not in medieval times, that's for sure. They were speaking in Middle English, and actual, 14th century, 15th century, right? So but he gives us the feel, like I think he does a good job of that. Prose, but yeah.
I haven't read Martin because I was waiting for a long time to have the series finished, but I do think I'm going to pick them up.
Oh yeah, I think you have to wait forever at this point.
I had a thing about not picking up unfinished series, but I changed how I feel about that. But where do you think Joe Abercrombie falls on that spectrum?
Yeah, so Abercrombie is probably a little bit, it depends actually. So he's got so many distinct voices. He does really well. And a lot of his, like, particularly characters from the North in his world have a certain way of talking that makes you feel like you're in that culture. He's very good at this. He's got, particularly in dialogue, his characters are very distinct and vivid. So a character who's talking. Sometimes you can identify the exact character, but if they're from the North or if they're from the more sophisticated or civilized part of that world. So he's very good at that. And it's at the same time, though, very accessible writing. So for a modern reader, I don't think people struggle at all with Abercrombie's prose. But he's got a real gift for voices, for giving his characters distinct personalities through their voices. But also, I think, conveying a sense of this is not our culture. This is a different culture.
Yeah.
I'm saying that as an American, so I don't know how a British person would actually feel about that, if they would have a different take. Because I think a lot of the things he does in there are very British. His humor, I think, is not exactly like Terry Pratchett's, of course, but it's still, I think, a very British kind of humor. I see it sometimes in Mark Lawrence's books too, particularly the Red Queen's War trilogy. It's a very, I feel, British kind of humor. I enjoy a lot. But Abercrombie's brilliant. He's brilliant. But yeah, I think he's definitely not writing modern colloquial dialogue or prose. He's steeping me in a different world.
I did enjoy his prose in the Shattered Sea trilogy, his YA series. I also read Mark Lawrence is another author who is not main series. I read, I think, his sci-fi trilogy.
Oh, okay.
I forget what that one is called, but it starts with one word, kill.
One word, kill. Yeah.
I haven't played a lot of D&D or any D&D actually, but that was fun to read regardless. So
cool. Yeah, he's an author. I've read The Broken Empire and The Red Queen's War, and I am now in the midst of, I've read the first book of the Book of the Ancestor, which is was wonderful. I had a great time reading it. So he's always a hit for me. I love Mark writing. Just seems to be right in the right place. And another one who, without it being conspicuous at all, puts you in another world through his language. He's a good one for that, I think. So yeah, cool. Well, it sounds like you are going to be reading a lot of great stuff and sharing thoughts with us on your channel. So I'm very much looking forward to all that.
Thank
And
you.
thank you so much, Varsha, for spending this time with me today. I have enjoyed this conversation immensely. I'm not sure I've had such a great time talking about consciousness with anyone for a while. So I thank you for that too.
Yeah, I had a great time too. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. And you bring such a great perspective here to our corner of BookTube, to our community with your expertise and your interests and everything and your experiences. So yeah, everybody check out Reading by the Rainy Mountain. And now you know the story of the where that channel gets its name. So go and check out Varsha's channel. I will have a link to it in the description below. Go and say hello to her there. And thank you everybody for watching this and listening to us. And until next time.